The stars were quiet. Too quiet. Across the shining towers of the Galactic Council there was an emptiness that even light could not fill. The great voices that once filled these halls, the human voices, were gone. They had left without ceremony. No long farewell speeches, no warnings, no promises, only silence, and a single word written on the main wall of the council hall. Remember, no one knew who wrote it. No human hand had been seen in the capital since the departure. But the word remained, bright, golden, and almost alive, as if the letters themselves breathed. At first the council members thought it was some kind of joke. The Thalaxians, tall and silver-skinned, laughed softly. The Varn Dominion's ambassador smiled with thin lips and said, "Typical humans, always so dramatic." And the Lyrians, beings of logic and order, declared, "It must be a message to themselves, a poetic farewell." They always did love symbols. But deep inside, many of them felt uneasy. It was not the humans' exit that frightened them. It was the silence that followed. For nearly 2 centuries, humans had been everywhere. Explorers, diplomats, traders, builders. They were the smallest and youngest of the great species, but their curiosity made them the loudest. They were the ones who asked questions no one else thought to ask. They were the ones who smiled even when things went wrong. To some, that made them inspiring. To others, annoying. But to everyone, they were unforgettable. Then suddenly they were gone. It happened quietly, without alarm or war or disaster. One by one, human colonies sent final messages. "We are leaving. Take care of the stars for us." At first, no one took it seriously. But the messages kept coming. And one morning, the entire network that connected human systems went dark. Ships vanished from known space. Their planets turned cold and silent. The humans had simply left. On the Council's central world, the others tried to continue life as usual. Meetings resumed. Trade routes reopened. New alliances were made. But nothing felt the same. It was like the heart of the galaxy had stopped beating. Ambassador Relis of the Lyrians, a thin being with clear glass-like skin, stood before the council chamber one morning. He stared at the word "remember" still glowing faintly on the wall. He asked softly, "Do any of you know what it means?" No one answered. The Thalaxian delegate shrugged. "It means humans liked drama." The Varn ambassador muttered, "They always wanted attention. Perhaps this is their final performance," but Relis did not smile. He tilted his head and said, "It feels like a warning." The chamber grew quiet again. Days turned into weeks, and the story of the humans' departure spread across the stars. Every planet had its own rumor. Some said the humans had found a new galaxy. Others said they had destroyed themselves with their endless emotions. A few whispered that they had transcended, evolved beyond matter, beyond space, beyond everything. But one thing was clear. No trace of them remained. Not a single ship. Not a single colony. Not a single human voice on any frequency. The silence became a presence, a living thing that settled between worlds and filled every moment when laughter should have been. In the years that followed, the council continued to meet. But conversations grew shorter. The spark of creativity, that wild, unpredictable energy humans brought, slowly faded. When humans had been present, meetings were loud, full of arguments and laughter. They questioned everything, even the council's rules. They made mistakes, yes, but those mistakes led to discoveries. Without them, things ran smoothly. Too smoothly. There were no more bold ideas, no more strange experiments. No one risked anything anymore. The galaxy became safe, quiet, efficient, and hollow. Ambassador Relis found himself visiting the empty human embassy often. It was a small building at the edge of the capital city, with wide windows that faced the stars. The furniture was still there, untouched. A mug rested on a desk. A coat hung by the door. Everything looked as if its owner had stepped out for a walk and never returned. Sometimes, Relis thought he could still hear echoes, the faint sound of laughter, the warmth of human voices. Once he found a note left behind on a table. It was written in human language, translated automatically by the system. It said only this: "We gave everything we could. If that was not enough, then perhaps it was not yet your time to understand." Relis didn't understand what it meant, but he kept the note anyway. Across the galaxy, other species tried to fill the absence. The Thalaxians offered to take over human research programs. The Varn Dominion expanded into human trade sectors. The Lyrians created an archive of human knowledge, storing all data ever shared by humankind. They did this partly out of respect, and partly out of guilt. But no matter how hard they tried, something was missing. Machines built by humans began to fail, not because of damage, but because no one understood the way humans thought. Human designs were messy, full of shortcuts and creativity. They didn't always make sense, but they worked. Without human intuition, those systems began to collapse. Scientists called it decay. Philosophers called it the fading. But some quietly said it was the price of forgetting. On the 10th anniversary of humanity's departure, the council held a remembrance ceremony. It was supposed to be a formality, a polite gesture, but when the time came, no one spoke. Each delegate stood in silence before the word remember, which still glowed softly on the wall after all those years. No one knew what to say. Finally, Relis broke the silence. He said quietly, "Perhaps they did not leave in anger. Perhaps they left because they were disappointed." The others looked at him. "Disappointed in what?" asked the Varn representative. "In us," Relis replied. "They offered us wonder and we mocked it. They offered us emotion and we called it weakness. They offered friendship and we called it chaos. Perhaps they realized we could not see what they saw." The room was still. No one argued. That night, Relis returned to the empty embassy. He stood by the window, looking out at the stars humans once loved so deeply. He whispered the word on the wall, "Remember." And for a brief moment he thought he heard a reply, a whisper in the air, a voice that was not a voice. It said, "Do you?" He turned around sharply, but the room was empty. Only starlight filled the air. He laughed softly to himself. "I'm imagining things," he murmured. Too much human history lately. Yet deep in his heart he knew it was not his imagination. Weeks later, the Lyrian Scientific Observatory detected a strange signal. It came from beyond the known stars, faint, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. At first they thought it was a malfunction, but the pattern was unmistakable. It was human Morse code. The signal repeated endlessly, "Remember, remember, remember." The council met in panic. Is it a message? Are they still out there? Is it a threat? Relis said nothing. He only watched the signal play over and over. It was not a threat. It was not even a message. It was a reminder, one the galaxy had not earned yet. As months passed, small changes began to happen across the known worlds. Plants humans had introduced to alien soils began to wither. Music once inspired by human culture began to fade from archives, the data simply gone. Even the stars near former human systems seemed dimmer. The universe was forgetting them, and maybe that was what the humans had meant all along. If the galaxy forgot, if no one remembered what it meant to hope, to dream, to love beyond reason, then everything humanity had built would vanish completely. They had not left just to disappear. They had left to teach, to see if the galaxy would remember what made them human. Ambassador Relis became known as the Keeper. He dedicated his life to preserving every story, every song, every image of the human race. He told young Lyrians tales of human explorers who crossed black holes just to see what was on the other side. He read them poems about love, friendship, and courage, words no Lyrian had ever written before. And whenever someone asked him why he cared so much, he always said, "Because someone has to remember." Many years later, a new generation of the council stood in the same hall where the word still glowed. None of them had ever seen a human, but they all knew the stories. The young Lyrian speaker pointed to the golden letters and said, "My teacher once told me that humans didn't really leave. They're waiting for us to become something worth returning to. And somewhere far beyond the stars, perhaps the humans were listening. Perhaps they were smiling. Perhaps, just perhaps, they were proud that someone had finally learned the meaning of the word they left behind." Years passed after the humans' departure, and the galaxy learned to live without them. At least that was what the councils liked to tell themselves. Trade routes reopened, industries recovered, and the great star nations found peace in predictability. Everything worked according to plan. There were no arguments, no surprises, no sudden changes. It was an age of comfort, calm, quiet, and perfectly ordinary, but it was also an age without laughter. The council hall looked cleaner than ever before. The golden word, remember, still glowed faintly on the far wall, but fewer and fewer beings looked at it now. It had become just another decoration, something historical, but no longer important. Meetings were short. Decisions were efficient. There were no heated debates, no passionate speeches, no strange ideas that challenged everyone's thinking. The humans had once brought life to those halls. Now everything moved like clockwork, smooth, mechanical, and soulless. Ambassador Relis, older now and slower, still attended every meeting. He listened to the others discuss trade numbers, mineral exchanges, border policies, and energy limits. Every decision sounded right, perfectly logical, but each one felt empty. He often found his mind wandering back to the past. He remembered the humans who used to argue loudly over small things. Why can't we help the smaller colonies? Why don't we try something new? What if we build something never seen before? They used to speak with such passion that it made everyone uncomfortable, but it also made everyone think. Now no one argued. No one dreamed. And Relis realized that peace without purpose was just silence in disguise. One day, Relis visited the Lyrian Archive of Cultures, a place where data from thousands of civilizations was stored. He walked through quiet halls filled with glowing memory crystals. There was a section labeled Humanity. It was smaller than he remembered. A caretaker drone floated nearby, cleaning the shelves. Relis asked, "Where are the rest of the human files?" The drone replied politely, "Many were deleted over time, Ambassador." Their data was rarely accessed. The council approved removal for efficiency. "Deleted?" Relis repeated softly. "Yes. Outdated content. Emotional stories, songs, art pieces. No practical use," the drone said. Relis stood still for a long moment. He realized that humanity's greatest creations, their dreams, their laughter, their feelings, were slowly vanishing. Not because of time, but because no one cared enough to keep them. It was not hate that erased humans. It was forgetfulness. The Lyrian Dominion had become the leading power in science and logic. Their machines ran the council's systems flawlessly. They had created algorithms that predicted almost everything: weather patterns, social needs, trade demands, making mistakes nearly impossible. Yet even the Lyrians noticed something strange. Their creativity was fading. New inventions looked like old ones. Their designs felt efficient, but not inspiring. They could replicate what existed, but not imagine something truly new. One scientist quietly said, "Perhaps we depended on humans more than we realized." Across the stars, the Thalaxians prospered too. Their trade networks grew vast, their profits high. They were proud of their success, but deep inside, something felt missing. In the past, humans had been their best trading partners. They bargained, not just with logic, but with stories, laughter, and trust. They would trade not only goods, but ideas, and those ideas had changed the Thalaxian world. Now trade was simple: numbers and credits, no heart, no soul. Even victory felt dull. A Thalaxian merchant once said, "The humans made every deal feel like friendship. Now it's only business." No one replied. There was nothing to say. On a small world called Lura 4, a group of young scholars began to study ancient human music. They discovered recordings filled with instruments and voices, soft, strong, joyful, sad. They played it across the city for the first time in generations. The people gathered in the streets listening quietly. Some smiled, some cried, though they did not know why. When the final song ended, a child asked, "Who made this?" An elder replied, "Humans." The child asked again, "Where are they now?" No one answered. The elder only whispered, "Gone, but perhaps not forever." While the galaxy became efficient, life also became colder. The arts faded first, then the laughter. Festivals once inspired by human creativity stopped. The councils banned emotional performances, calling them disruptive. Children were taught that emotions were unnecessary for progress. They learned how to calculate, but not how to care. And slowly, the galaxy became a place where everything worked, but nothing lived. Ambassador Relis, now retired, often sat by his window in the quiet capital city. He kept the small human note he'd found long ago on his desk. He read it every morning. "We gave everything we could. If that was not enough, then perhaps it was not yet your time to understand." He often wondered what humans wanted them to understand. He thought about it for years but could never find the answer. One evening, as he watched the twin suns setting, a soft knock came at his door. It was a young Lyrian student named Asha, bright, curious, and strangely emotional for her kind. "Ambassador," she said, "I've been studying human history. I want to ask you something." Relis smiled. "Come in, young one. Few still ask about them." She sat across from him and said, "Why do you think they left? I've read every theory, science, philosophy, even mythology. But none makes sense. Why leave everything behind?" Relis looked at the fading sky. "I think," he said slowly, "they left because they believed we had stopped listening." Asha frowned. "Listening?" "Yes. Humans talked about feelings, compassion, kindness, curiosity. They said those were strengths, not weaknesses. We disagreed. We thought logic alone could guide us. They were disappointed." "So they left to teach us?" she asked. "Perhaps," Relis said. "Perhaps they wanted to see if we could remember what made them human, and what could make us truly alive." Asha visited him often after that. Together they studied human art, their literature, their strange and beautiful ways of thinking. She began teaching children about them, telling stories of human explorers who looked at black holes and saw beauty instead of danger. Her students loved those stories. They started drawing pictures of stars, writing poems, creating music again. It was small, but it was a beginning, a spark in the darkness. The council did not like it at first. They said such teachings were unnecessary emotion. But Asha's quiet determination reminded many of someone long gone with human courage and stubborn hope. And slowly, others joined her. In time, whispers began to spread. Machines that had once run perfectly started to act strangely. Some ships refused to launch, their human-made components flickering with unknown codes. One message appeared again and again in diagnostics. "Remember." Technicians were confused. They erased the word, but it came back every time, like a ghost in the system. Relis, when he heard of it, simply smiled. He said softly, "They are still here in some way, waiting." The Thalaxians, too, began noticing changes. A strange new material appeared in one of their factories, strong, light, and beautiful, unlike anything in their database. When scanned, the molecular pattern spelled out words in Old Human English: "Hope never dies." The discovery spread across the stars. Some called it coincidence. Others said it was a miracle. But for the first time in years, people across the galaxy spoke of humans again, not as a lost species but as a mystery. Children asked about them. Scholars searched for their music and art. And slowly, gently, the word "remember" began to mean something once more. Ambassador Relis grew weaker with age. One night, as Asha sat beside him, he said, "Do you know what comfort truly is?" She shook her head. "It's not peace or order," he said softly. "It's knowing you are not alone. The galaxy has comfort now, but no heart." The humans understood that comfort without connection is emptiness. He smiled faintly. "Promise me, Asha, you'll keep teaching their stories." "I promise," she whispered. As the stars shone through the window, Relis looked out one last time and murmured, "They gave us everything, and maybe one day we'll be ready to give something back." The room fell silent again, peaceful, but not empty. Because for the first time in centuries, someone truly remembered. Years later, a new council generation stood in the same chamber where the golden word still glowed. Asha, now an ambassador herself, looked at it and spoke softly to the assembly. We built an age of comfort, and in doing so we forgot what it means to dream. Humans warned us in one word and we ignored it. But their lesson remains. Comfort is nothing without hope. Peace is nothing without compassion. Logic is nothing without heart. Her voice trembled slightly, but she did not stop. They left us a gift, not a curse, the memory of what we could be. For a moment no one spoke. Then, for the first time in generations, someone smiled. A real smile, not a polite one. It was small, but it was human-like. And somewhere, across the quiet stars, something shimmered faintly, like a signal waiting to be heard again. The age of comfort was ending. Something new was beginning. Centuries had passed since humanity's departure. Their cities were gone, their ships were dust, and their songs were almost forgotten. Almost. For the first time in ages, the galaxy had begun to whisper their name again. It started with small things. The music rediscovered, the words carved in old machines, the sudden reappearance of that one word. Remember. Then came the dreams. Asha, now ambassador of the Lyrian Dominion, often woke from strange dreams filled with images she could not explain. Blue skies, oceans, and laughter that felt alive. Sometimes she saw faces of people she had never met, smiling as if they knew her. She always woke with tears in her eyes, though she didn't understand why. One morning she told her assistant, "I think the humans are trying to speak again." Her assistant, a young Thalaxian named Vero, looked puzzled. "But how, Ambassador? They have been gone for hundreds of years. No one has seen even a trace of them." Asha looked at the golden word on her office wall. "Maybe they are gone," she said softly. "But their memory isn't." In the capital city, something unusual began happening. Across old systems and networks, systems that had been silent for centuries, a signal appeared. It was faint, rhythmic, and endlessly repeating. When decoded, the translation was simple. Remember the dream. Scientists were confused. They tested everything: signal strength, direction, frequency. It seemed to come from nowhere, or everywhere. The council gathered to discuss it. Some said it was a glitch in the communication grid. Others feared it was a trick from another civilization. Asha sat quietly through the arguments, her eyes fixed on the glowing word that still hung over the council hall. Finally, she spoke. "Maybe it isn't a threat," she said. "Maybe it's a message from those who cared enough to remind us who we were meant to be." The room fell silent. For the first time in many generations, someone had spoken about humans not as a myth, but as teachers. That night, Asha visited the old human embassy. It had been untouched for centuries. The same desk, the same empty chairs, the same coat hanging by the door. Dust floated through the light like tiny stars. On the table she found the same note Ambassador Relis had once kept. "We gave everything we could. If that was not enough, then perhaps it was not yet your time to understand." She touched the paper gently and whispered, "Maybe now is our time." At that moment, the lights flickered. A soft hum filled the room, not from the city's power grid, but from something deep within the building. Asha turned. On the wall behind the desk, new words appeared beneath the old golden one. "You remember?" The next day, Asha called for a meeting with the council. She brought the data, recordings of the glowing words, the signal repeating. Across the stars, the strange reactivation of old human systems. "This isn't random," she said firmly. "This is deliberate. The humans left something behind. Not just technology, but a message for us to find when we were ready." The Thalaxian ambassador frowned. "Asha, even if it's true, what does it mean? What are we supposed to do with this?" "Understand it," Asha replied. "And finally remember what we forgot." The council agreed to send an expedition to one of the oldest human worlds, Terra 7, a planet once called Earth's twin. It had been abandoned for centuries, surrounded by silence and mystery. When their ships landed, they expected ruins. Instead, they found beauty. The forest had reclaimed the cities. Nature thrived where machines once ruled. And in the center of what used to be a human settlement stood a statue, untouched by time. It was not a ruler, not a warrior. It was a man and a woman holding hands looking up at the stars. At the base of the statue, one word was carved into the stone: hope. Asha stared at it for a long time. She whispered, "They didn't build monuments for power. They built them for love." Vero nodded quietly beside her. "It's strange," he said. "Everywhere we go, there's that feeling. Like they never really left." As they explored deeper, the team found something even stranger. Beneath the statue was a sealed chamber. Inside it, untouched for hundreds of years, was a single recording device still functioning. Asha pressed the button. The room filled with the sound of a human voice, soft, steady, filled with warmth. "If you are hearing this," the voice said, "then you are ready. We were never perfect. We made mistakes. But we loved deeply, and we believed in something greater than ourselves. In connection, in unity, in hope. That is what made us human. And that is what can make you more than you are." The message ended with a pause, and then the same word echoed again. "Remember." Asha felt tears in her eyes. The others stood in silence. At that moment, the ancient building lights flickered back to life. Screens across the chamber showed images, human faces smiling, helping others, holding hands, looking at the stars. It was like the planet itself had been waiting for someone to come back and watch. When Asha returned to the council, she brought everything: the recordings, the images, the message. And for the first time in many ages, the great hall was filled with sound. Not debates, but emotion. Not logic, but wonder. The Varn Dominion ambassador, once cold and distant, said softly, "We called them sentimental, but maybe that's what we needed to become." The Thalaxian representative nodded. "We called them dreamers, but maybe they were builders of something deeper. Not structures, but meaning." Asha smiled. "They were both, and they left us a seed, not of power, but of remembrance." Across the galaxy, news spread like starlight. Worlds that had forgotten how to feel began playing human music again. Children learned human stories at school. Artists painted human faces not as legends but as friends. Machines that once failed mysteriously began working again when human art and words were reintroduced into their networks. It was as if those machines had been waiting for love to return. Scientists were stunned. They tested the systems and found that old human designs contained strange patterns that responded to emotion, not just logic. It was a mystery, but one that filled everyone with awe. Humans had built their technology the way they lived, with heart. Asha traveled to many worlds, sharing the message of the humans. In every speech, she said the same words. They didn't leave because they hated us. They left because we stopped feeling. They wanted to remind us that emotion is not weakness. It is the strength that connects all living things. Her words touched many hearts. Soon, new schools opened, the academies of remembrance, where beings from all species studied the history and philosophy of humankind. They learned not just how humans thought, but how they felt. They read about kindness, forgiveness, friendship, courage, and hope. Concepts that had been forgotten were alive again. One evening, as Asha watched the twin suns set behind the city, she saw something shining in the sky. A faint line of light, like a ship's trail. It moved differently than any known vessel. She whispered, "Could it be?" Vero smiled beside her. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe it's just their way of saying they're proud of us." The light faded into the stars, but Asha's heart felt warm. For the first time in her life, she felt truly connected, not just to her people, but to something greater. Years later, when Asha grew old, she returned to Terra 7 one last time. The forests were greener, the skies clearer. The statue still stood, now surrounded by flowers and carvings made by beings from 100 different species. On the stone, base below the word hope, someone had added another word in glowing letters. Remembered. Asha smiled. She placed her hand gently on the stone and whispered, "We remember. Always." At that moment, a gentle breeze passed through the trees, and for a heartbeat, she heard something. A whisper, faint and kind, carried on the wind. It said, "Thank you." When Asha passed away, the entire council gathered to honor her. They called her the voice of remembrance. Her teachings became a way of life across the galaxy. New songs were written, not by humans, but inspired by them. New art flourished, bright, emotional, alive, and every school, every ship, every world displayed the same golden word that started it all. Remember. It was no longer a mystery. It was a promise. A bridge between what was lost and what was found. In the centuries that followed, the galaxy entered a new age, the age of renewal. The councils no longer ruled through logic alone, but through balance, mind and heart together. And though the humans were still unseen, their spirit was everywhere. In every song, in every smile, in every act of kindness. Because humanity had not vanished. They had become a part of everything that remembered. Far beyond the edge of known space, on a quiet blue world, no longer on any map, a light flickered in the dark, a ship rising slowly into the stars. Inside, a voice said softly, "They're ready now." Another replied, calm and proud, "Then it's time to go home." And across the endless galaxy, as the stars glimmered brighter, one word echoed once more. Not from machines, not from voices, but from the universe itself. The galaxy had changed. Asha's teachings and the rediscovery of humanity's message had spread light through thousands of worlds. Yet beneath the hope something uneasy stirred, a quiet realization that the galaxy's peace, logic and order had not been strength but emptiness. For centuries, the councils had ruled with calm precision. They believed that logic alone made them wise. But when the truth of humanity's legacy grew stronger, the councils began to see how blind they had been. The Grand Council Hall had not changed much, still bright, still silent, still carrying the golden word "remember" across the highest wall. But the people within it had changed. New ambassadors filled the seats, the Laxians, Lyrians, Varn, and dozens of others, all raised on the stories of humankind. They spoke more softly, with more feeling, more understanding, and at the center of it all sat the High Counselor, a Lyrian named Dalen. He was thoughtful, calm, but heavy with guilt. Because now, with all the rediscovered truth, the councils could no longer ignore the past. They had mocked humanity. They had laughed when humans spoke of love and compassion. They had called them weak for caring too much. And now they knew that everything beautiful that once existed in the galaxy, art, courage, imagination, had been born from those very weaknesses. Ambassador Vero, once Asha's assistant and now one of the youngest leaders in the galaxy, stood before the assembly. He looked up at the word "remember" and then turned to the council. "Honored members," he began, "we celebrate the return of humanity's teachings, but we must also face the truth of what we did to them. They left because of us, because we refused to understand." The room grew still. He continued, "We called them sentimental, but they were strong in ways we could not measure. We told them emotion had no value, but without emotion, we lost the meaning of life. The councils once said logic would save us, but logic alone only brought silence." Dalen lowered his head. "You speak truth, Ambassador Vero. The galaxy prospered, but not as living beings, only as machines pretending to live." The council agreed that they owed humanity more than remembrance. They owed them an apology, even if no human lived to hear it. But how could they apologize to ghosts? So they decided to build something new, a monument that would stand in every world not to honor power, but to remind everyone of humility, kindness, and unity. It would be called the Garden of Remembrance. Every species would plant a seed from their homeworld, and at the center, a single empty space would be left for the humans who had once walked among them. The project began immediately. Across the stars, workers of every kind came together: engineers, artists, dreamers, scientists. It was the first true collaboration between all known civilizations since humanity's departure. And strangely, everything worked smoothly. There were no arguments, no greed, no pride, only shared purpose. For the first time, the galaxy acted as one. But as they built, they began to notice something strange. The more they spoke of humanity, the more the world seemed to come alive again. Old forests grew greener. Stars shone brighter. Even the air on some planets felt warmer, lighter. It was as if the universe itself was responding, as if the human spirit had been waiting for this moment. A Varn scientist said quietly, "It's almost like the galaxy breathes again." And another replied, "Maybe it's not the galaxy. Maybe it's them." When the garden was finally completed, it was unlike anything anyone had imagined. It wasn't grand or shining, but it was simple, natural, peaceful. Every species had planted something beautiful. Glowing flowers from Lyra, crystal vines from Thalax, trees that hummed from Varn, and gentle moss from distant moons. At the very center stood a single stone, smooth and plain with one word engraved upon it. "We remember." No one knew who carved it. No one claimed credit. It was as if the universe itself had written the message. The opening ceremony was quiet. Millions across the galaxy watched from their homes as the High Counselor Dalen stood before the stone. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "For centuries we believed we were wise. We believed emotion was chaos and logic was perfection. We were wrong. We lost our heart the day the humans left. And now, after all this time, we finally see wisdom without compassion is emptiness." He paused, his voice breaking softly. "Humanity, wherever you are, we remember. We thank you. And we are sorry." The crowd stood in silence. Some wept quietly. Others smiled, feeling warmth they could not explain. Then something happened. A soft wind moved through the garden, gentle but sure. The flowers swayed, the trees shimmered, and the air filled with a faint hum, like distant music. And for a brief moment, across every world connected to the garden, a familiar word appeared on every screen, every light, every signal: "Thank you." No one could explain it. The message came and vanished as quickly as it appeared. Scientists searched for its source, but no machine had sent it. It was everywhere, and nowhere. Vero looked up at the stars that night and said softly, "They heard us." Dalen nodded beside him. Maybe they never left. Maybe they were waiting for this, for us to finally understand. In the following years, life across the galaxy began to change again. Education no longer focused only on efficiency or data. Children were taught about empathy, courage, imagination, and kindness, lessons humans had lived by. Every child learned the story of how the galaxy lost its heart and found it again through a single word. Remember, art returned. Music returned. Laughter returned. Even politics changed. Decisions were now made not just for logic, but for life. And the galaxy began to feel truly alive once more. But one mystery still remained. What had really happened to the humans? No one knew for sure. Some believed they had ascended to another plane of existence. Others thought they had simply gone to the farthest edge of the universe to start anew. One theory became the most popular, that the humans had not left forever. They had left until the galaxy was ready. And now, perhaps that time was close. One quiet evening, Ambassador Vero sat by the garden's central stone. The stars shimmered gently above him. He whispered, "If you can hear us, we remember and we are grateful. You changed us forever." A soft light glowed across the stone, faint but visible. Words began to form, bright as starlight. "We never stopped believing in you." Vero gasped softly. "Is that you?" he asked, though there was no one to answer. The light flickered once more before fading. But the warmth in the air remained. He smiled. "Then you were right after all. Hope never dies." Back in the council hall, the leaders gathered once more. High Counselor Dalen stood before them, his voice steady and full of feeling. "We once ruled through power and fear of chaos," he said, "but we have learned that life is not meant to be perfect. It is meant to be beautiful." Humans understood that. They lived with heart. They dreamed with courage. And now we must carry that forward. He raised his hand toward the golden word shining above them. "This word once made us feel guilty. Now it gives us strength. We will remember not just them, but what they stood for: love, hope, and unity." The entire council stood. They bowed their heads together in silence, not out of shame, but out of respect. For the first time in galactic history, the word remember had become a way of life. Years passed, and the legend of humanity became more than history. Every starship carried the word remember on its hull. Every home had a small corner dedicated to peace and hope. The councils had learned humility. No longer did they speak of domination or superiority. They spoke of learning, of harmony, of shared existence, and sometimes, when the night was quiet and the stars were bright, travelers would swear they saw something out there. Lights moving in patterns that felt familiar, almost human. They said it was the humans' way of watching over them, not as rulers, but as guardians of memory. Generations later, on the 1000th anniversary of humanity's departure, the galaxy held a grand ceremony at the Garden of Remembrance. Every world sent a representative. Every being, no matter their kind, stood together as one. A small Lyrian child walked to the center of the garden, placed a hand on the central stone, and said softly, "Thank you for teaching us to feel." And at that moment, the wind rose again, gentle, warm, and full of whispers. It carried across the garden, across the world, across the stars, and though no one could see them, everyone knew the truth. The humans were listening. The councils had paid the price for their arrogance, but in doing so they had found redemption. They had learned that true strength was not in logic or perfection, but in compassion and connection. And from that day forward, the galaxy lived by a new motto, one written in golden letters across every council hall, every school, every home. Centuries had passed since the day the humans vanished. Their memory had become legend, their message a sacred truth whispered across the stars. The galaxy had changed. No longer divided by pride or cold logic, it had grown united, kinder, wiser, full of life again. The councils that once ruled with control and arrogance now guided with care and understanding. And everywhere, in every city, on every planet, one word shone quietly. Remember. Children spoke it as a greeting. Leaders used it before making decisions. Artists painted it into the skies. It was not just a word anymore, it was a promise. But even as peace filled the galaxy, there was still a quiet emptiness. The humans had not returned. Their home worlds remained silent, their ships unseen. Sometimes travelers said they felt something near the edge of space, a warmth, a sound, or a flicker of light that moved like a heartbeat. But no one could prove it. The humans were still gone, or so everyone thought. One day, a young researcher named Lyra from the world of Orpheon discovered something strange. She was studying the energy signals that traveled through the Garden of Remembrance, the great living monument built for humanity centuries earlier. For years, the energy had been stable, but suddenly it began to change. The readings pulsed in patterns, soft, rhythmic, almost like a language. At first, Lyra thought it was a natural fluctuation, but then she noticed the rhythm matched an old human Morse pattern. Her heart began to race. She ran to her mentor, Ambassador Vero, now an old but wise figure who still carried the warmth of human teachings. "Ambassador," she said, almost breathless, "the garden is sending a signal, a human one." Vero looked at her with wide eyes. "A human signal? Are you sure?" "Yes," Lyra said, pointing to the data. "It's faint, but it repeats again and again. It's trying to say something." Vero leaned close to the screen. His voice trembled softly as he read the simple translation. "We are coming home." The news spread faster than light. Every world, every species, every council turned its eyes toward the skies. Could it be true? Could the humans, the ones who left, the ones who changed everything, really be coming back? The councils called an emergency gathering in the Great Hall of the Galaxy. Old Dalen had passed many years ago, but his teaching still guided them. Now his successor, a gentle being named Seren, spoke to the crowd. "We do not know if this is truly them," Seren said carefully, "but we must prepare with open hearts. If humanity returns, we must show them that we have learned, that we are ready to walk beside them as equals." No one disagreed. No one laughed. The galaxy held its breath. Weeks passed. The signal grew stronger. It came from deep beyond the known edge of the galaxy, from a region so far away that no ship had ever gone there and returned. The councils launched a mission, a ship named the Promise, led by Lyra herself. She stood at the helm, her hands trembling slightly as she whispered, "If they really are out there, we will find them." The promise carried representatives from every major world: Lyrians, Thalaxians, Varn, and more, all united for one purpose. As they left the safe routes of the galaxy and entered the unknown, the stars seemed to watch in silence. Days turned into weeks, and the signal grew clearer. Sometimes it sounded almost like a song, gentle, warm, full of hope. It was not just noise. It was alive. At last, after months of travel, the promise reached a star system none had ever charted before. The sun was small, but it shone bright gold, a color that felt strangely familiar. Orbiting it was a blue planet wrapped in white clouds. Lyra stared through the viewport, her voice barely a whisper. "It's beautiful. It looks just like Earth." The sensors confirmed it. Breathable air, green land, blue oceans. But there were no cities, no signs of advanced life. Then, as they approached the surface, the signal grew louder, and suddenly, a bright beam of light shot up from the planet, filling space with a single word: "Welcome." The crew gasped. It was human language, not clear, simple, kind. They landed the ship near the source of the beam, a valley surrounded by tall trees and quiet lakes. The place felt untouched, yet full of gentle energy. When Lyra stepped outside, she felt warmth in the air, not just from the sun, but something deeper, something that made her heart feel full. Then she saw it. In the center of the valley stood a small stone monument, old but clean, with words carved into it in hundreds of languages. At the top in English it read, "If you remember us, then you have never been alone." A hush fell over the crew. Tears filled Lyra's eyes. "They knew we would come," she whispered. Suddenly a soft sound echoed around them, footsteps calm and steady. From the trees, figures began to appear. Not ghosts, not holograms, but real, living beings, humans. They looked slightly different, taller, calmer, their eyes shining with gentle light, but they were unmistakably human. One of them stepped forward, an elder with silver hair and kind eyes. "Welcome, travelers," he said with a smile. "We have been waiting a very long time." Lyra could not speak at first. You're real. You're really here." The elder nodded. "Yes, humanity never vanished. We simply left to learn, to grow, to heal. The galaxy was not ready then, but you are now." They invited the crew to walk with them. The valley was full of life. Gardens, rivers, and homes built in harmony with nature. Children played, birds sang, and in every direction life seemed peaceful and balanced. The elder explained gently, "When we left, we were broken. We felt unappreciated, unwanted. We needed to understand ourselves before we could return, but even then we never stopped watching. We saw you learn, change, and become what you were always meant to be." Viro's recording played in Lyra's memory. Maybe they never left. Maybe they were waiting for this. She smiled softly. "You waited for us to remember," the elder nodded. "Yes, we waited for you to feel." For several days, the humans and the crew of the Promise shared their stories. The humans told of distant worlds beyond the known stars, where they learned from new civilizations and shared kindness instead of conquest. They had chosen to live quietly, nurturing forgotten worlds and healing the damage left by ancient wars. And the crew shared how the galaxy had changed, how the word "remember" had transformed everything, how the councils had learned humility, and how art and compassion had returned. When the elder heard that, tears filled his eyes. "You truly learned," he said softly. "Then our journey was worth it." Before leaving, Lyra asked the elder, "Will you come back with us? The galaxy wants to see you again." The elder smiled kindly. "We will, but not as leaders, not as heroes. We will return as friends. The galaxy does not need saviors. It needs companions." He looked toward the sky, where the stars shone like a river of light. "When you go back, tell them this. Humanity has not returned to rule. We have returned to walk beside you." When the Promise returned home, every world watched as the transmission played. Lyra's voice spoke through every communicator, every city, every screen. "We found them. Humanity lives. They have seen us and they are proud." And then she shared the humans' final message. "We are not above you nor below you. We are one with you. Remember this always." The galaxy wept with joy. For the first time since their departure, the humans' presence was real again. Not as a story, not as a dream, but as a truth that united every living being. Years later, the humans slowly returned. They settled on new worlds, working beside their old friends, teaching, listening, and learning in turn. They built schools, gardens, and observatories that welcomed every kind of life. And together they began a new age, the age of remembrance. The old word still stood in every hall, every heart, remember. But now it had a new meaning. It was not just about remembering humanity. It was about remembering what it meant to be human. To feel, to care, to forgive, and to hope, on a quiet night. Lyra walked alone through the garden of remembrance, now brighter and fuller than ever. The air shimmered softly, and for a moment, she thought she saw shapes among the stars. Human ships flying beside others, their lights moving like a heartbeat. She smiled and whispered, "They came home." And from somewhere deep within the stars, a gentle voice answered, maybe in her heart, maybe from the universe itself, "We never left." From that day onward, no one in the galaxy ever spoke of them and us. There was only we. The councils had paid the price for their pride long ago, but now they were part of something greater, a family that spanned the stars. And on every world, in every language, the same simple word was carved into stone, whispered to children, sung in songs, and carried through generations.